Maximizing the internal rate of return on your cash surrender value. Part 3 of our series on universal life insurance. And I'm telling you, my friends, the best article you've ever read. If you're at all interested in life insurance, you need to read this for sure. Now, you might say, I'm not interested in universal life. Well, that's up to you. I'd challenge you. I would. So don't forget to read the article. I linked to it in the show notes. It is by far and away the best article on life insurance I've ever read, by far. And I've read a lot of life insurance articles. I know universal life insurance. I know whole life. I know term. You name it, I know it. But this right here has opened my eyes in ways I never thought of. So welcome to Heritage Wealth Planning YouTube channel, my friends, the place you come to learn about life insurance. Woohoo! Does it get any more exciting than that? So don't forget to subscribe. And once you do, don't forget to click on the bell down there to be notified for future content. All right. Going back to the Kitces article right here, I'll just show you the link. This is under universal life insurance funding strategies, optimizing death benefit versus cash surrender values, IRR. Maybe I should just put that in the title of the articles. That's a lot to chomp on, though. Anyway, so let's go back. So, and this is written by my man. I've never met this guy, but Rajiv Rebello of Calva Insurance Services. And here's Rajiv. And it's through the Nerd's Eye View, Kitces.com blog. And there's Michael Kitces. And as I said in the other two episodes of this dude right here is machine. He's just a machine on terms of financial planning. He's done just yeoman's work. At some point, he should get the Nobel Prize for financial planning. There's just no other way around it. Kitces is the man of all men when it comes to the internal stuff of what you need to know about insurance. And if Kitces hasn't written about it, it's just not that important. Kitces does a Periscope thing too, by the way, more for financial advisors. But if you're interested in this stuff, you sign up for his blog and everything. You'll learn a lot from old Kitces, even if you're not a professional. All right, so let's go down to Rajiv's, the third part of this article. Maximizing the IRR and the cash surrender value. So the DB is a death benefit. The opposite of that is your cash value. We say cash surrender value because the surrender value is how much you have to pay, you get back after surrender charges. So lots of insurance annuities have the surrender charge, so that way you don't sell the policy or relinquish the policy too fast and they can't recoup their cost. A lot of times it's just the cost of the commissions they pay. But at the end of the day, CSV is what we use for cash surrender value. IRR is just the terminology for internal rate of return. Well, maximizing the IRR and the insurance policy's death benefit, we just talked about that the last episode, so go back, requires a policy owner to minimize the premiums paid into the policy for a given death benefit amount. Maximizing the rate of return on the cash surrender value requires a policy owner to maximize the premiums paid into the policy while minimizing the death benefit. Two completely distinct strategies here, my friends, so that the policy owner can minimize the total cost of insurance charges, which in turn maximizes the tax-deferred growth in the cash value. So remember, we have cost of insurance charges, which consists of cost of insurance rates and your net asset at risk, the net amount at risk the insurance company has. So we'll go into that. Let me see if I can't make this a little bit bigger. In the early days of permanent cash value life insurance, this strategy was impossible because all the insurance policies were whole life, where the premiums and associated future cash value growth were all guaranteed. In other words, it wasn't flexible enough to proactively, I knew I should have done that. In other words, it wasn't flexible enough to proactively change the funding strategy to maximize the internal cash value growth of the policy. However, the rise of universal life insurance and its flexible premium structure in the early 1980s, it didn't take long for clever financial advisors and life insurance agents to realize they could dump in large amounts of premiums into a life insurance policy and use the tax-deferred growth to build up. Stay up there, dude. There we go. Oops, stay up there. Okay, there we go. All right, there we go. All right, so however, the rise, okay, it didn't take long to realize they could dump large amounts of premiums into a life insurance policy and use a tax-deferred growth buildup of life insurance cash values as a way for their clients to accumulate assets while not paying taxes on them, far beyond what whole life policies were intended to be. In order to limit this, Congress enacted legislation in 82 and 84 that capped the amount of premiums that policy owners could pay into policies to avoid unduly shrinking the net amount at risk in a manner that would have otherwise virtually eliminated paying any cost of insurance charge. What's going on here is people are crazy funding these whole life policies, crazy amounts of money, essentially as an investment. It wasn't a whole life policy, so they're putting this huge amounts of investment, turning taxable assets to tax-free because life insurance comes out tax-free. So they're putting all this money in, and it was smart. It was because this is taxable assets, funded, and they're going to take it out tax-free. I mean, it's a remarkable tool, but Congress was hip to that, and they said, no. And so now they have these things, corridors and limits on how much cash you can put in there. Thus, in today's world, in order for the policy to qualify for a life insurance policy, necessary to make the death benefit tax-free, so it has to be life insurance to make the death benefit tax-free, the policy must satisfy one of the two following tests. GPT, which is guideline premium test. For a given death benefit, this test requires that the death benefit at all times be a certain multiple above the then current accumulated cash value, which is known as the GPT corridor factors. The corridor requirement assures that even if the policy owner pays the maximum premium into the policy in an effort to close the gap between the cash value and the death benefit to minimize the net amount at risk, as the life insurance component, that the death benefit itself will eventually rise, ensuring the NAR stays at a certain level above the cash value, effectively ensuring the policy remains an insurance policy. In addition, the GPT limits the premiums that can be paid into the policy in the first place. So GPT guideline premium test, it limits the amount that can actually be paid in there in the first place. The premium limit is based on an actuarial calculation that solves for the maximum premium the life insurance company would need the policy owner to pay in order for the life insurance company to fund the death benefit obligation, assuming the life insurance company assessed the highest expenses possible. Woo! Guaranteed charges, as by definition that the premiums paid are in the worst case scenario on cost of insurance charges, then the policy is literally being overfunded beyond what any life insurance policy would need, and thus it isn't permitted. All right, so basically what the rules say now, the maximum you can put in the guideline premium test is $100,000 because that is what you would need to put in there in the worst case scenario to make sure this policy will be funded at the death of the insured. That's what that says right there. You can't put any more than that. The maximum you can put in there is this amount of money. Cash value accumulation test, CVAT. Unlike the GPT, this test does not limit the premium payments that can be paid in the policy. It only requires that death benefits at all times be a certain multiple above the cash value, the cash value accumulation test. As you might have guessed, these CVAT corridor factors are significantly higher than the corresponding GPT factors in order to make up for the lack of premium limitation. You're going to have the net amount at risk will continue to grow relative to cash value. So death benefit is growing, cash value is growing. The reason why that's important is because there has to be a certain net amount at risk to make this a life insurance policy. So if I put in $8 million, trillion, billion, I'm going to have that plus X amount of dollars above that for the life insurance component to kick in. So that way at my death, it transfers tax free. And that's the ultimate is what's going on here. We want it to make a life insurance policy. We've got to keep a death benefit significantly above, to some degree, the cash amount in there so it can retain itself as a life insurance contract. The option of whether the policy will be tested in accordance with the GPT or CVAT rules must be made at issue and cannot be changed later. So if our 50-year-old policy owner is looking to maximize the cash surrender value, IRR, which should he or she choose? On the surface, it appears that GPT would be the better option because the corridor factors are significantly lower than the CVAT corridor factors, making it easier under the GPT to limit the net amount at risk, which in turn limit the cost of insurance charges and allows for greater tax-deferred growth. But we're going to see what my thing here says. Go after. Okay, so we're going to go down here. I'm not going to show you all this. I want to come back down here. We're going to skip a little bit because there's a lot going on here. You should absolutely read it. Don't get me wrong, but let's see. right here to continue. All right. You should absolutely read that if you want, but I want to get into the gist, a GPT versus a CVAT, because I think my man Ravij has some wonderful illustrations there. High insurance commissions necessitate high early year experiences. While max funding a GPT policy increases the long-term IRR over funding a CVAT policy with the same premium, it does nothing to help the early year cash surrender value IRRs, which are atrocious. And I'm going to talk about what he says. Even with a max funded policy, the early year CSV returns are extremely, cash surrender value, are extremely poor. The universal life policy as investment doesn't even break even till year 15. So basically, here's our IRR, internal rate of return, right? And look at that. Not until here does the internal rate of return actually get above zero. Here's zero. So we're having negative IRRs on the cash. Now, this is just on the cash surrender value. It's not on the death benefit. So if you put in $100,000, you're only going to get $34,000 in year one, roughly, which would be a negative 65% rate of return. Now, slowly goes up slowly until about year 15, you put in $100,000, it's worth $100,000 in cash surrender value. That means for 15 years, you made nothing. Now, it slowly grows above that, but we're still in talk, was that 2 or 3%? So why are policies so expensive, so much higher in the early years? The answer is agent commissions. Remember that in the first year, the life insurance company gives the agent who sold the policy approximately 100% of the first year premium paid into the policy. This means that from the get-go, the life insurance company is operating at a loss. In order to recoup these expenses, they typically charge high policy expenses in the early years. That's what's happening here. So they're paying so much in commissions, they got to return it, which means they're going to put high fees on there to make sure that they're going to get their money worth before you take the policy out, which means they lose money. Or surrender the policy. All right. Premium here. So in order to recoup these expenses, they typically charge high policy expenses in the early years through a combination of the following methods. Premium load. This is the percentage of the premium that is deducted as an expense every time a policy owner pays a premium into the policy. It can be anywhere from 2 to 15% of each premium dollar going into the policy. Typically, these are higher in the early years and decrease at a certain point in the later years. At USA, the policy load was 5%. Now, it wasn't a commission. I'm telling you, I didn't get paid commission, but USA got that as a load. It's just a charge. You don't call it a commission because no one's getting it for the benefit of selling it to you. I didn't get commission on that, but it's a load. And if you put $100,000 in there right off the gate, $5,000 is gone. A monthly policy fee. This is the regular monthly fee that the life insurance company deducts from the policy's cash value every month. Typically, these are also higher in the early years and decrease at a certain point in the later years and can be very high percentage of the still relatively small cash value in the early years. So again, we're going to have a pretty significant expense on the front years to basically cover the huge expense of the commissions of the agent right there. So that's going to be pretty significant. Surrender charge. This is a back-end fee that assesses if the policy owner cancels the policy. It is extremely high in the early years, but decreases over time. Most policies charge the policy owner a surrender charge if he or she cancels the policy within the first 15 or 20 years in order to recoup the high agent's commissions that has been already covered through the higher premium loads and monthly policy fees. The fees are insane. That's why if you can buy one of these without an agent, you should. The problem is USA and TIA-CREF, you're just dealing with people on the phone. And so if you're dealing with people on the phone, you're like, I don't know if they know what they're talking about. Or, I mean, I went through TIA-CREF with this surrender, second to die life insurance policy. It was like pulling teeth, man. I mean, because they had no incentive, it was just like pulling teeth. I mean, I was trying to do other policies too. I said, I can't work with these guys at TIA-CREF, just because it was literally, it was just a horrible situation. It wasn't like the guy was unfriendly, just never returned my calls, never got back to me. I had no incentive whatsoever to make me understand the policy, how it's structured, and even to sell me other things. I just thought it was horrible because I was like, dude, I told him what I wanted to buy, and it was bad. And USA is the same thing. The pie chart shows how these cumulative costs impact the cash value of life insurance in the early years of a GPT policy with $110,000 maximum funding premium. So you got 68% is the surrender charge. You got your premium load. You got 15% is your policy charge. And then you got your cost of insurances right here. And then at the end of the year, you got 11% cash surrender value. So you got on $110,000, you got, what's that? $12,000 in there, cash surrender value. The maximum premium you can pay into a GPT policy for this 5 million policy is $110,000 a year. After paying 2 years of $110,000 a year, 21% of the value is eaten up by policy expenses. Another 68% is eaten up by surrender charges, leaving you with only 11% of the premiums paid available as end of the year cash surrender value. Note that the total net premium load expense is the total premium load expense minus the accumulated interest gains that have been made during those 2 years. As the chart above shows, the problem with the policy is that in the early years, a large amount of the premium paid into the policy is eaten up by expenses and or held for surrender charge that may be assessed, even though the actual life insurance cost is actually quite low. In fact, the actual cost of insurance is only 2% of the cash surrender value. It's all these other stuff that eat you up on. In other words, the actual life insurance expenses of this life insurance policy are extremely cheap. Financial advisors should know a breakdown of all policy expenses can be often requested with an illustration. However, this is an additional policy expense report and must be specifically requested. The illustration would be the in-force illustration I always talk about. And the agent is not required to show it and may avoid showing it if the policy owner doesn't, and may avoid trying to show it so the policy owner doesn't see the high early year expenses being deducted from it. So you need a policy expense report. That's what you need. If you're going to get a whole life or a universal life, get a policy expense report. All right. As we saw, this is huge. As we saw in the previous section, the appeal of the GPT policy is that allows you for a lower net amount at risk, NAR, over time by having a narrower corridor, but is stuck funding more premiums in the early years when the initial overhead expenses are higher, which drags down the cash surrender value over time. In this context, CVAT policies can be more appealing because they do not limit the premiums that are paid into the policy now or in the future. CVAT simply forces the death benefit to potentially increase more rapidly by having a larger corridor value. This means it's possible that a CVAT policy to buy a smaller face amount initially and then later dump in a larger amount of premium after the high expense early year period is over. This, I'm telling you, this is huge. I did not know this. A strategy that many advisors and especially agents neglect, as lower upfront premium payments with such a strategy could dramatically reduce their commissions. So let me just revisit that. It's possible with the CVAT policy to buy a smaller face amount initially and then later dump in a large amount of premium after the high expenses in the early periods. The problem with that, the smaller the face, the smaller amount that goes in, the smaller the commission to the agent who sold it to you. As we'll soon see, the strategy to leverage a CVAT policy can bump up the implied return on cash values dramatically. The CVAT policy also comes with the added advantage that the policy owner is essentially buying a policy when he or she is young and in great health and locking in that underwriting class so that the years later he can pay into a very large amounts of premium contributions into the policy at the low cost insurance for when he got underwritten, he or she. This is why I say buy the flipping term now. Buy it now when you're young and healthy because it's so cheap. It's so cheap. Later on down the road, if you need to extend it by converting it to a cash value like we're talking about here, and you're 62 years old and you got diabetes and a heart attack and you took out a 30-year term policy when you're 37, you can still do that because the underwriting is based on your underwriting, they got approved at 37, not as you are now at 62. The exact same things are here. Locking in that underwriting class, I cannot stress how important that is so that years later, he or she can pay in very large amounts of premium contributions into the policy at low cost of insurance rates for that underwriting class, even if the health of the insured has declined, which makes an even better deal. In the graph below, let me see, do I got any notes? Okay, that's again why I talk about buy the term later, or now when you can, when you're healthy, and buy a bigger policy you think you might need. In the graph below, look at this. So in the graph below, the policy owner purchased a tiny $100,000 death benefit policy and pays only $550 into premium each year to keep in force. At the start of the year 21, the policy owner dumps in $3 million premium payments. So here we are. We did at 50. We're paying $550 a month, almost like a term policy for a $100,000 death benefit. But because it's a CVAT, at 70, we dump in $3 million, which means our death benefit goes from about $4.5 million. So basically, you got roughly $2 million almost of net amount at risk. So that's the insurance amount. But our $3 million is now growing like crazy, and our death benefit is shrinking. So the net amount at risk is shrinking because our cash value is growing, which means the cost of insurance charges is dropping because the NAR is shrinking. Even though our cost of insurance rates is increasing as we get older, the NAR is dropping significantly more than the rates of the cost of insurance are going up. And so because of that, the total cost of insurance is going down. Buying a small face amount CVAT allows a large pay-in to be made in the later years when policy expenses are lower. This large sum contribution causes the death benefit to increase because of the CVAT corridor factors, as we just talked about. We're increasing the death benefit significantly without taking all the crazy expenses and surrender charge and insurance agent commissions. This bumps up the NAR initially, increases the COI charges accessed to the policy. However, the large contribution also allows interest to accumulate in the policy. Over time, the interest in the policy accumulates faster than the corridor factors are lifting up the death benefit. All right, I'm going to kind of stop there, but I thought right here. Okay, so this will be the last part we talk about. The CVAT corridor factors decrease as the insured gets older. The narrowing CVAT corridor permits the death benefit to get closer to the cash value over time, which in turn permits a reduction in the NAR, which means your cost of insurance is dropping. It's just amazing. The large dumping causes interest to accumulate to the policy faster than the COI charges are growing, even though the COI rate is increasing as the insured gets older. The actual COI charge is not growing that fast because of narrowing NAR. In fact, the interest of policies accruing each year is significantly larger than the COI charges, allowing the cash surrender value to grow over time, even in the years when the COI is growing. So here's your cash surrender value. It's growing more so than the cost of insurance. So let's just stop there. I did not know about this, and I've been in this business a long time. I see that. I have no clue. I'm going to see if I can't get my man here, Ravi, to do an interview with me, because this is just one of the best articles I've ever seen. And before I was thinking, just write off UL and just go whole life. I'm thinking differently now. So I hope this helps. I'll put links to show notes. So listen out if I can get my man Rajiv on the line here, because that is just a wonderful article. And before you just disregard whole life insurance, or this is universal life insurance, let's hear what Rajiv has to say. And I just think there might be a lot to do this that could really be a benefit to you for your estate and certainly for tax-free growth in your assets. So don't forget to subscribe down below. If you like what we talked about here, go to heritagewealthplanning.com. Comments, thumbs up, always helpful, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.